I was a liquor consultant for 14 years. Of course, alcohol being a major part of my story, rooted in childhood to being a young adolescent, teenage years. I thought it was the best job in the world. And granted, I went on the dream trips, but every single time I went on one of those trips, I woke up with a massive hangover. The turning point came down to, there was one incident. Now, I was sober at the time, and I was dropping off my daughter, and my daughter said, "Dad, don't go, don't go." And here she is kicking and screaming and crying at 2.5 years old. And I was like, man, this is it. I honestly say that was my rock bottom. It was the realization in sobriety that I had gotten myself to such a particular point in my life that my marriage had failed. My kids were no longer under my roof. I had been to the ER multiple times. I had spit up blood. My stomach was an absolute mess. I was told by an ER doctor that if I continued to do what I was doing, I was not going to live much longer.
Hey everybody, this is Will Gordon from the Willpower Podcast, briefly coming on before this next excellent episode to remind you all that did you know that 76%, you heard that right, 76% of you that follow my content regularly have not subscribed to my channel yet, and I'm really wondering why that is. So if you could, the easiest and freest way to help support my show is to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of it. Like it, share it, send it to people that you think it might help. Because that's what I'm doing here. I've been through it. I lost my liver. I lost my kidney. I had such a severe alcohol addiction that I feel you, okay? I understand what you're going through. And I'm really hoping that these stories are helping. So if you want to hear these stories keep coming, then please hit that subscribe button. It'll be the best decision that you'll ever make. Thank you so much for supporting me. And I really hope you enjoyed this next episode. I heard it was a pretty good one. Take care, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another excellent episode of the Willpower Podcast with Will Gordon. Today, I'm thrilled to announce that I have a very special guest. His name is Luke Ryan. His handle is @DadOnTheMox, and he is a certified life coach, Jay Shetty trained life coach, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Will, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah, of course. So, Luke, if you could share a little bit about yourself, your history, and maybe a little interesting fact about you. How about that?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm, with getting into my story, I've shared that quite a few times, and I always like to say, I was a liquor consultant, and for 14 years. Of course, alcohol being a major part of my story, from rooted in childhood, to being a young adolescent, teenage years, into my 20s, and of course, then from actually ending up in a career of providing liquor stores and restaurants with alcohol, making recommendations for wine lists. I mean, as a liquor consultant, it was not only a major part of my life, but from my upbringing into adulthood, I really thought like it was my life. It was a major part of it.
Yeah, when you're working around alcohol, that cannot make it easy. I know from personal experience. I worked at a wine cellar. I was a bartender at a yacht club down Cape Cod here, and did that for 3 summers. And yeah, man, being around alcohol all the time, it makes it a lot easier to kind of take a drink every now and then. I fell in love with it because I had a problem with alcohol, so obviously I did, and maybe I was subconsciously doing it or not. I don't know, but I was choosing those jobs because the money was right and it was exciting and you got to drink, honestly. So that's probably why I did it. But back to your story, you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's funny, now that I'm hearing that you're a native New Englander. I'm from Rhode Island. So
oh, there you go.
So, but yeah, the culture of alcohol, when I've told my story, I always talked about when I was young and that I started drinking really, really young. I mean, by the time I was 10 years old, I was, sneaking booze and, right into my teens. And, I had family members, a large family that, I grew up with older cousins, an older brother who later passed in life. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Also, yeah, I appreciate that. And, it's that was one of my major excuses. Oh, I can drink because if you lost a sibling, you drink too. I could drink for this reason, that reason. But as far as ending up in the world of, liquor, being a liquor consultant, I thought it was the best job in the world. And granted, I went on amazing trips to Napa Valley, to whiskey country, to Italy. I mean, these were like the dream trips, but every single time I went on one of those trips, I woke up with a massive hangover, splitting headache, but that started long before I found myself in that career.
Yeah.
So the way that I drank was with purpose.
Right.
I was not drinking to take the edge off. I wasn't the gray area drinker that we talk about in the sober movement that we see now. And I'm very passionate about using those words because sobriety is something that was once, a shameful thing. And, now, from my personal opinion, what we see, there's no bad form of sobriety, whether you're choosing a program of AA, whether you're involved in an online community. Therapy, of course, is extremely beneficial, but it's brave and bold to say help.
Yeah, it is brave and bold to say help, and I wish I knew that back in 2020 when I was really hitting it hard and not knowing the ramifications of my, the consequences of my actions, which would then lead to the liver and kidney transplant, right? You said something earlier that I'm curious about. You said you drank with passion. What do you mean by that?
Oh, it was both with passion and purpose. It was intentional. It was to simply I was going to get banged up. It was pull the ripcord, because I'm going in, and that's how I drank. I drank with intent, and eventually what that turned into was drinking with over the course of years. Eventually, when we get to the point of depression and divorce, and we can get to that part of my story. Then I heard the term was drinking, the suicide on the installment plan, because there were days that I just didn't feel like I wanted to wake up. I wasn't sure if I would. And honestly, there was a point in my life where I will say I didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that one. It's easy to get sucked into that style of stinking thinking, right? I mean, it's so easy because when you're putting a depressant, which is what alcohol is, on top of someone who's already showing signs of depression, right? It can get really ugly quickly. So let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about like what your drinking history was like? Let's go there.
Yeah, sure. From early on, sneaking booze from the family liquor cabinet to young teenage years, it was very much finding the guy with the beard or the fake ID that could go into the liquor store and buy for us. Even before I had a driver's license. I had a family member who owned a liquor store, and this was my uncle. And at one point, he allowed me to work there. When I was a kid, I stole from him. I had an older brother at the time that said, "Hey, take it." And funny enough, I stole like 100 proof old granddad.
Wow, you're going for the big,
it's like,
the hardest of the hard stuff.
That's the stuff. And I'm like, well, if you're gonna do it, you're going at it. So very clearly, my mentality was just to go hard.
Yeah.
So, really from there, it went on through, family, issues, divorce with my parents. You wonder, I'm not going to sit here and play the violin and say they did this. What I've started to reframe a lot of things, especially being a coach and, in years of therapy, and I'll get to my purpose at some point as well. But I used to have the mentality of this happened to me. Now I look back and I go, this happened.
Yep.
And what was my part in it? Because I'm the one that's accountable. I'm the one that's accountable. And, the way that I drank very much was with intent to really to just check out.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very similar to Luke. I would say that my intent was to not feel feelings anymore, not worry about the stressors of life, only to then be woken up with a bile puking and the hangover is so bad that if the only thing that would cure it would be more alcohol, and then next thing you know, I'm drinking 24/7. So that's scary. So tell me about like what was the turning point in your life when alcohol became too much or just had too much space in your life?
Well, I'd say it was countless times. It was that vicious roller coaster ride of going to, man, I really need to, not even in my 20s. All right, I should probably, I wanted to cut back. I didn't know any better. I figured, okay, well, and then I get a couple of days here and there, and I go, oh, I'm all right. Yeah. The next thing you know, you're right back into it.
Mm-hmm.
The turning point, I mean, really came down to, much later. The turning point came down to, uh, the same story I told on sober motivation with Brad was, I mean, there was one incident. Now I was sober at the time, and I was dropping off my daughter, and my daughter, said she was just like, "Dad, don't go," and here she is kicking and screaming and crying at 2.5 years old, 3 years old, and I was like, "Man, this is it." So my rock bottom actually
Wait,
was in sobriety.
can you talk about that a little bit more? I
Yeah.
feel I don't think I fully comprehended that whole story. So your daughter was in the car with you and said, Don't go where?"
Well, she didn't want me to leave. This is at the point of divorce. This is
Mm-hmm.
at the point of I'm divorced. I'm dropping off my
Mm-hmm.
child to my ex-wife.
Okay.
I had some sobriety under my belt, and and when people talk about your rock bottom, they usually say, "Well, what part of your drinking was it?" And I honestly say that was my rock bottom. It was the realization in sobriety that I had gotten myself to such a particular point in my life that my marriage had failed. My kids were no longer under my roof. And I knew on that very moment that, you know, this was my opportunity right there to say, okay, well, there's no relapse here for me. There is no just one, because the mentality prior to that was, well, maybe I could get people off my back if I quit drinking for a bit. Maybe I could drink again someday. And for me, that was just like, no, this is it. This is life's work. There is no, if I stay sober for 5 years, maybe I could drink again, because that's the mentality I had at one point.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, maybe if I just get some time under my belt, I'll be okay. Everyone will get off my back, and I can go back to drinking in seclusion and privacy the way that I like to.
Mm-hmm. So you were a private drinker as well.
Yeah, I got to a point of 100%. I didn't, I would go out, I could only go out in public if I drank prior, because I had such social anxiety that I had to get lubed up before I
Mm-hmm.
went out to see anybody.
Yeah.
And then when I went out, I was like, oh, I could be the life of the party. And but none of these connections were wholesome or real. In my connection with myself, I was so disconnected. I simply did not know what self love and care was. And that's something you and I touched on it before we, hit the record
Mm-hmm.
button. Was now it's just so prominent in my life that, um, if that's what I'm hooked on now, that's a pretty good thing to be hooked on.
And that's a hard thing to get hooked on because it takes some serious vulnerability and growth, right?
Yeah,
Like authentic growth, like not bullshit growth. Like oh, like
yeah,
look at me, I'm tough guy now and I love myself. No, 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 no. It's the opposite. You have to like showcase your faults, showcase your shortcomings,
yeah.
be vulnerable to the highest level of conversation you can be in actions, right? So what did that look like for you? I mean, I can only imagine. What's really interesting that I kind of want to talk about too is when your daughter, it might not be loud and like you actually like, got in trouble and the cops came. No, 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 no. Like this is way more subtle and meaningful. I feel like, your daughter in the backseat not wanting you to leave, and that being the realization, like if this doesn't, like fix the direction or the trajectory of my life right now, it's either I choose this or I choose that, and you chose yourself and you chose your daughter and your family over alcohol, which is just congratulations on having that 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 realization and the willpower to do that.
I appreciate that. I think it takes real courage, for anyone to look at themselves and to look at themselves in the mirror and say, you know, the way that I've been behaving was wrong.
Yeah.
The way that I've treated myself was wrong. And, the wake of what was left behind, I don't think I was a bad person. I don't want to say I was a bad father. had, DUIs and the arrests at 18 and 21, long before I settled down into a marriage, long before, children came into my life. And, now I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
But, the way that I show up for them as a present and whole father now is, rooted in sobriety. And it's because I decided to, and get myself involved in a program of sobriety, and to take a good hard look at myself. I spent years in therapy, and I still, see, a therapist, which I hadn't seen for a while. And recently I had stuff come up. I said, you know what, I've got to talk to this.
Yeah, you gotta talk it out. I don't know why we grew up. We grew up in the generation that it was just, it was weak to express any kind of vulnerability. Honestly, it was weak to say that you had an issue. It was weak to say you were struggling, just
Right.
struggling. Just let's just put that foundational word down. Struggling, period. Like I my house. You grew up in Rhode Island, so you're an East Coast guy, so you get it. Like I grew up in a house there. It was like you do your job, you do the right thing. You keep your mouth shut, you show respect, and that's it. Like you don't talk about your problems. You don't talk about. You definitely don't talk about alcohol having too much space in your life, because I'm surrounded by it all the time with like my family and stuff like that. So you definitely don't talk about those kind of things. So that was the camp that I believed in, and I didn't want, and that was like a part of my identity had to be stripped away for me to show that actual growth. Right? It was a very long learning process, and similar to you, I'm still going to therapy because I think talk therapy is extremely important just for your mental health. Right? But yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like we grew up in a very different. Oh, I'm speaking for you. I'm sorry about that, but on the East Coast, primarily, you do find that like a little more tough love than you do elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it all starts at home. And, and again, I'm never going to get into, this story I always like to keep about very much with, in my actions and in my history. And the fact is that I think that there was a time where it was smoke Marlboro Reds and drink Budweiser and drink Jack Daniel's whiskey, and, and, and very simply, rub some dirt on it. And, I have always been I'm a sensitive guy. I have no problem saying that. No, but I didn't know, no, no one said, hey, listen, it's okay to cry if you're a
Mhm.
man. No one told me that.
Mm.
And the fact is, I harbored so much for so many years that processing that all floods to the surface. All of a sudden, I'm like, why am I crying? When I first got sober, why am I crying? Why am I emotional? Why am I? It's like, because you've been suppressing this
Mm.
for decades, man. For absolute decades. So to go into therapy, to peel back the layers, and that's why, with what I do in my practice and the people that I speak with, and what I've decided to do in recovering out loud and be part of this sober movement, this sober community,
Mhm.
is to simply convey, like, we're stronger together. We are okay to speak our truth and to say, you know what? I don't care what your gender is, male, female. The fact is, alcohol is poison. I promoted it for the longest time, and it's not an excuse. I literally didn't know any better, because culturally and socially, it was and is still very accepted.
Mhm.
But for me, and there are people I know that can drink out in safety, and that's fine. It's absolutely acceptable.
Yeah.
But for me, I cannot drink in safety.
Yeah.
And my level of self care and self love is prominent, and I can extend that out into the world when I'm taking care of all of my individual pillars of health.
Yeah.
Because sobriety was job one.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, like, what was that first week like when you went sober? Did you went into a facility?
yeah, I went to a facility, and then I went to one, and then I think I got 8 months under my belt, and then I went back, and I relapsed.
Uh-huh.
And then when I went back,
That's a pretty significant stint you did in relapse. I'm curious about that. What happened?
well, I mean, I was still involved in, I was still married at the time, and I got eight, and I had those 8 months going, and you know, I, without getting into too
course, yeah.
much detail, there were bigger, things going on, within the household. And, um, you know, I always say this with some tact, because you have to feel supported. You have to feel supported, and you have to feel supported in your partnership.
Of course.
And at the time when I had 8 months of sobriety, I was still in my tenure as a liquor salesman too. So here I am now going to Friday meetings, swishing wine, sniffing it, and then dumping it in a bucket. And I did, I accomplished 8 months of sobriety
While
in my
doing that.
career. And I had full support of my company at the time. And, eventually I chose to resign, and they asked me if I could stay, but there's no way. There's no way I could. And would they being polite? Probably. They're probably like, this guy. Let's. I mean, I did well. I did well for the company. At the same time, they probably saw me as a liability, and rightfully so, because I was,
Yeah.
certainly, to myself.
Yeah, I was I was a liability to myself too. I actually enjoyed bartending with a buzz so much because I would make more. I was like a gregarious, fun guy to be around apparently.
Yeah.
But when I would go in sober, I sucked. I sucked.
Yeah.
I sucked at it. I was like a terrible bartender. I don't know what that's all about. Go figure. But yeah, lesson we should have learned a long time ago. But I didn't. So that first week when you what was it like? Was it uncomfortable? Like, tell me about that process.
Yeah. So going through, when I really, um, when I went through the process of the next detox, which there were three, so back to the same facility, but that was like 2 weeks afterwards because I didn't last very long the second time. But, you know, I'm not glorifying this in any way because when I came out of that facility, I went out and drank for, 2 or 3 more days. And I actually went back to the facility because there was a girl there that I was interested in. And I went down in a blaze of glory, the way it's just, I don't even want to say it that way.
I understand what you're
It was, I was mentally unfit, and when I finally got out of there, I had a family member who was actively in the program of AA, and I had the opportunity to stay with him, but I pushed it as far as I possibly could.
hmm
And that, when I went in there, I did genuinely share. I had been to the ER multiple times. I had spit up blood. My stomach was an absolute mess. I know you understand this more than anybody.
Mm.
And, I was told by an ER doctor that if I continued to do what I was doing, I was not going to live much longer.
Yeah.
My potassium levels were fatally low, and I was going to die. Keep going keep going the way you're going to go, and you will die.
hmm
And but after the last time I came out of rehab, it was, I'm going to go just have another couple of nights, and that's honestly, and I did. I did. I really did.
Yeah.
But I knew it was the end. I knew it was the end. It was December 30th, 2018 was the first day that I true, that's my sober day. And I've been sober ever since.
Since
So
2018.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So 6.5 years.
Yeah, 6.5. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's amazing. All right.
Thank you.
So now share with us. What was that moment like when it all clicked for you? Like you said on that day specifically. So what happened on that day specifically that when it all clicked?
It was, it's funny because I've had people ask me, well, you didn't wait till New Year's Eve. I was like, no, I was done. I'm like, I don't care. I didn't need another excuse.
When you're done, you're done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it. I could have said, oh, well, tomorrow's New Year's Eve. I could drink one more day. I'll start of the new year. But now it was the 30th of December. And I just said, I just can't do this anymore. I think it was, and over the course of the last 3 days at my family member's house, I nursed a 6-pack and I drank 2 beers a day. It was the first time, probably one of the first and only times that I physically made sure that I was going to take myself down and wean myself off of alcohol. And I remember him asking me, he's like, you done with this shit, buddy? Yeah, I just gonna milk these last couple of gross, disgusting beers and be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I knew at that point. I was like, I don't want to live that life anymore. In the first 2 years were extremely hard.
Where what?
They're extremely hard
Oh
the
my
first
God.
2 years.
So let's talk
Yeah,
about that. Let's talk about those first
yeah,
2 years, because I don't think a lot of people understand just how crucial those first 6 months to a year are. And definitely 2 years, I would say, because after that first year, you're on that pink cloud, and you're like, oh, I'm the sober master. But then next thing you know, you're out at a ball game or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, those guys are having so much fun. There's beers in their hands, and they're throwing a football around like this. Oh my God, why am I like this? But you can't think like that. You can't think like that. Okay. You can still throw the football and still laugh, still do all the awesome things, like you would normally, but you don't have to have the booze. But yeah, so tell me about that. Like, what was that moment like for you? So like everything clicked. Now those first 2 years were really tough. Like, why were they tough?
Well, I mean, I got active in the program of AA, which I spent the first about 2.5 years of my sobriety in, and I still say it to this day that that program saved my life. I'm not involved in AA anymore, for my own personal reasons, and I think it's an amazing program. Um, and I know that the doors are always open. I could walk through
Yes,
any day.
that's what I love about AA. The doors are always open no matter what, and that to me is, substantial.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
just
huge.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
huge, and I know that that's available to me, and I know that there are guys and ladies that if they saw me, they'd be like, oh, we wondered about you. But to answer your question and to touch on years 1 and 2, it was going through getting that 6 month, those 30, 60, 90-day chips, and then going to hitting 6 months, 9 months, and when I hit the first year, I was like, I thought there was going to be some grand revelation that 1 year in, and I was like, oh, okay.
I remember going to
And
get my 1 year chip, Luke, and they didn't have any chips that day. Isn't that funny? That's like the universe being like, dude, like get off your bullshit, man. Like, don't fucking worry about the chips. You can't bring the chips with you know what I mean? Like don't worry about you're doing it for you, right? Like
yeah,
you know it, right?
but did you feel it? Did you
Uh
feel the
y-
sobriety?
yeah,
It's
for sure felt it. I for sure felt it. But you know what's funny? The only chip that I actually it's funny, it's right here. The only chip that I actually carry around with me like all the time. Like you can ask my wife, like I carry around it's called the 1 day chip because that's how
yeah,
that's how I focus on my sobriety. I'm like 24 hours, man. You did it. You did it again. Like there
yeah,
it is. So I always just have this as just it's more like a moniker for like my my resiliency and keeping it all together and knowing, if I do ever decide to ever drink again, which I hope to God I will never ever make that decision, but you never know because life is crazy like that. But um, that to me is just an important little thing that I keep in my pocket as a constant reminder of why I'm doing this, who I'm doing it for. And self love, man, self love. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's get into that because that's a
100%.
huge
Yeah.
part of your story, I know, and I wanted you to kind of start that conversation. So, talk to me about self love. What does it mean to you, and especially in the landscape of sobriety?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, sobriety is obviously, in my opinion, and for me, it's job one. That's why if I would say it's rooted in sobriety, and that's how we evolve. That's the beginning. Because once we remove the substance, whatever that may be, I mean, that could be something different for anybody. But if you are looking for dopamine hits from alcohol, substance, digital, whatever it could be, it's quite empowering to remove that stuff. And then, how do you care for yourself? Can you sit with your feelings? It's a key question. Can you sit with your feelings? Can you breathe through them? Can you process them? Can you talk to another individual, another man, woman, therapist, and actually be honest and raw and real and say that I am going to radically look at myself and evolve? And for me, there's no room for complacency there.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't. When I don't do the things that I feel are medicine for me, outdoors connected to earth, time at the gym, make sure that I do find time to rest, time to meditate. I've found connection and community at just around 6 years of sobriety. I did not do this before. My social media presence and then finding purpose to get into, certification for life coaching came by the advice and the support of others to say, you've got a powerful story.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be pretty cool if you shared that.
Yeah.
Because before that, I didn't think my story was worth sharing. I didn't think that anyone would want to hear from me. And that for me was, not seeing my value. I wasn't really understanding of what my value was,
Yeah.
which was a deeper meaning for me. It was so much more than that. It wasn't just alcohol. It was, what was I burying with alcohol? And why was I doing that to myself for so long?
Right.
And when I finally had come to the realization that you're a pretty decent human being, you have stuff to offer. People care about you.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to that, I just didn't care about myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I unfortunately had that same thought process, and I came to that actualization as well when I was lying in a hospital bed and going through all my transgressions and the people I've mistreated over the years and because of my alcohol use. And I made amends. This is like when I was it was touch and go. It was really serious. It was about like 5 to 8% chance of surviving. So it was touch and go. I was in septic shock for the entire night. And that's what I was doing. I was just going through all the people in my life that I wronged, or, just treated badly because of drinking. And I said, I from like the most genuine part of my soul, I said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to each one. And then coincidentally, in some kind of act of a miracle, honestly, I started to improve, and then my levels got better. And then I woke up and I felt still awful. Like I was still just
Of course.
went through a life-saving ileostomy surgery. So I was still awful, but I was so thankful and I felt so blessed. Like I was like kissed by, all knowing love energy that is God, or whatever you want to call it. Right. That's how it felt. And that's really cool that you also had that same thought process as you were kind of having that self-discipline and that the autonomy over your life. You had full autonomy and love and compassion again, which is something that you were probably seeking your entire life. Right.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. I mean, I just want to verbalize too. Will, your story is just so powerful and so inspirational for that. It's humbling to have the opportunity to speak with you and to share, because we've all had similar circumstances rooted in, the levels of alcohol abuse. And to take it one step further, I think it's very important for us to share that message of self-love and care. Um, the topic of alcohol is a majorly important one, but one of my questions that I ask those who I work with
Mm-hmm.
is, or that I connect with, you're sober. Now what? What's next? Because I didn't know who I was. And it took me till after 3 years of sobriety to start to be like, I started asking myself that question. Who am I?
Who am I? I know with that feeling, man. Like waking up and doing all the work and putting it, and then finally getting home, and then a month goes by, 2 months go by, and I'm sober. I'm getting better. I'm feeling better. I'm looking better. All these things, right? I'm better. And then I'm like looking around. And I'm like, who am I? What are my morals? What are my convictions? What kind of character do I have? Like, those are all things that I think that were instilled within me from my father being a good father, and my mother being a good mother, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, like I didn't believe any of those things. I felt like I was a fraud. Like I was a teacher, but I was drinking all night. I was a contradictory character. That's how I was living. I was living in like a character's. I was living like a character. I don't know what it was, but that I had to find myself
Yeah.
again. I had to become the person, fake it till I make it kind of thing. I really did. I had to like, okay, if like I want to be a better version of myself, like what would that better version look like, right? Would what would they do first? First of all, they would start mending relationships, right? That would be the first step I would start doing. What would they do next? They would, they take care of their body. They would obviously not drink again. They would start putting healthier things into their system, drink tons of water, get lots of sunlight, exercise in the morning, journal, have pleasant conversations with my wife, cook, like all these things that you should be doing in the first place, but we just through having stagnant energy and being comfortable with being comfortable with the discomfort like for so long, it's so hard for people to change. But yeah, that's how it kind of went for me for a while. So I'm just curious, like, how did it finally go for you? Like when did it start? Like after those 2 years, you said was the turning point where those were really difficult. When did it become easier for you to maintain?
I mean, it's when did it become easier? I mean, life's hard. Life's hard. But I guess I'm sorry to say. When did it become easier?
Well, when did it become more manageable? When did it become like you had more control over it? And like, how do you
Well,
maintain?
definitely. I mean, year 1 and 2, it started to become more manageable. This is different for every individual. But for me, there is no what if for me anymore with alcohol. It's just not there. I don't drink. It's not for me. I'm so steadfast in my mindset. I won't say that in the past years it hasn't crept into my mind, but I immediately squash that. I just go, well, I'm like, well, that's interesting that I would even think for a second, what would it be like to drink again? And I laugh. I just laugh and I go, well, it's not even an option. But life became more manageable, I'd say, realistically after year 2. And then as I continued to progress, I started to feel, I want to say this appropriately, that I needed to develop a different program for myself. I needed to reconnect with myself. And I found a lot of time in solitude, which was much different than the past,
Mhm.
being lonely and depressed. So I found solitude in nature. I found a lot of time in hiking. And then, a lot of time, reading, educating myself and getting my mind to start, really working and rewiring again. Finding levels of physical health, because I knew I had to rewire my brain. But being connected to earth is, if you see a lot of my stuff, I say connect to earth, connect to oneself.
It's
And
it's
yeah,
so important, isn't it? I mean, like getting out and experiencing grass under your toes. Like, how often does a human do that nowadays? Like, it's almost like we don't do it anymore. We don't naturally go and put our feet into the grass and stuff like that,
it's,
like we're kids, because
yeah,
you get a charge, you get like a natural buzz from that, because that's like the earth, like signaling back there, you're alive, we're all connected, blah, blah, blah. Different podcast, but we'll stay on topic here. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
like getting in the lens of a sobriety lens, right? Like getting within nature and then feeling like you're not just the center of the universe, it's actually like a much bigger thing. Like look how bigger that tree is, look at the sky, look at like the birds, like it's all a beautiful symphony of just how beautiful it is to be alive, and to experience that and to be in the moment and to be sober in that moment, and to be in the solitude and to look at a perspective that's bigger than you. It's just so humbling in ways that it amazes me that it's not recommended more.
well, it's in other cultures, it actually is prescribed. They will prescribe individuals to go gardening for a certain amount of weeks that have depression or, or addiction or alcoholism. And we have been socially marketed to for substances. And on this topic, the topic of alcohol, I'm guilty. I was one of the guys that was out there,
So yeah.
making sure there were stacks, and but I was, um, I was right in there in the thick of it. I was a believer.
Mhm.
I was a believer until I saw the end result of where I was going, and I know, speaking for myself, I know you can relate. So
Yeah.
I understand your story.
Yeah. And I think another interesting little part we can go into too is like the why, right? Because it's like, why do this? Why put in all this work, right? What is the outcome here, right? And for me, it was like, well, I need to find something as awesome as it was to drink, right? Because it was awesome in the moments. Like, fine, now what do I do? Like, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but like, who am I? What's the convictions I have? Like, what are my morals? Like, what do I believe in? Like, what do I like? What do I, what are the things that I really care about, right? And that played a lot of part about getting new hobbies and starting my own podcast, going on others and sharing my story. Like that then became something that was way more enthralling and exciting and meaningful, than alcohol ever could be. And that's important for people to understand that. Like when you go sober, you really need to start thinking about yourself in a different light and like, okay, what am I passionate about? What do I care about? Like, what do I want to pursue in my life? Right? Like everyone wants to pursue something and they care about something and they're good at something. It's just a matter of finding that something and then pursuing it with the highest level of excitement you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, seeking purpose has been exactly kind of what has gotten me to where I am, and that's how I felt. Because as we talked to the points of a little while, well, when did things start to click for you? I believe was some kind of the question you had
Yes,
asked me.
yes.
When
When
did
did
I?
it
Well,
absolutely
who
fall
am
into
I?
place? Hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, I spent years in therapy after that. I started looking at attachment theory within myself and understanding, uh, childhood traumas. And when you start looking at that stuff in sobriety, that's hard work. But man, there's value there.
Hmm.
There's so much value. And then you start to discover not only a bit of who you were, which is okay to remember, but it gives you a real uh, bit of realization of who you truly want to become.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that makes me salivate. And that's the stuff that I love to work with others on
Hmm.
because it's, it's a key question.
Yeah.
Who are you and where do you see your life going?
Yeah.
What do you envision that to be like? Those are very powerful questions.
Because for alcohol for me was like it was just holding me back in so many areas of my life that I wasn't aware of. Like I would watch mindless crap on TV for hours and hours. Like it would add up to years, I feel like, But now if I glimpse that, like we don't have cable or anything anymore, but like when I glance at something just kind of meaningless, I mean, there are times where we purposely put meaningless stuff in front of us, but I'm not pursuing that anymore. Like I'm just craving more knowledge, more information, whatever I'm curious about. I'm just pursuing those things all the time, and there is no way I could have had this mindset, prior.
I'd rather have a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. And I heard this the other day. It was one of those things that just kind of opened my mind. And I'm very fortunate that I don't have this in my life. That you know, uh, the question was, the statement was, I'm sitting next to someone and I feel I miss them. I miss the person I'm sitting next to. Because we have these outlets of telephone, our cell phones, Netflix, but um, I'm very fortunate that I have people in my life that I can sit next to, even in silence, and feel much more connected than I do, with a Netflix show on.
Yeah.
And of course, I have two kids. We watch movies. They have tablets, but they're not on them a lot. We spend a lot of time in nature.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Oh, I actually kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So I know it's a subject that you said you were okay with talking about, but you are a
Sure.
single father, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah. I'm a single dad. I mean, yes, they have a mother, but yeah, it's and that's part of what my coaching practice
Yeah,
is based on.
I was curious about if you could elaborate more on that because I'm actually
Yeah,
very curious about how you handle that.
yeah. So what I do is one-on-one coaching, and everything I do is rooted in sobriety, but that doesn't mean I don't work with people that consume alcohol. But the vast majority of the people that I do speak with, of course, are in the sober community. Most of the people I connect with are on social media. Instagram is, or Facebook. Those are the two platforms that I utilize. And But my niche really is relationship with self and parenting and co-parenting dynamics. Because when you go through sobriety, do you have to, reinvent your relationship with your significant other? The answer is 100% you do, especially if that was a big part of your life. How do you co-parent in sobriety? And and parent well as a single father, such as myself. So I love the topic of parenting because, of course, I have two kids and I make mistakes all the fucking time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a perfect parent.
No.
But man, if you're sober, you're going to do a hell of a lot better of a job.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
You're taking care of yourself, you're going to do a hell of a lot better of a job.
Yes. Yes. It goes without saying that, like, once you start practicing self-love, start taking care of yourself, start doing the right thing, appreciating who you are, appreciating like your uniqueness, like just taking care of yourself, man. That just opens up all these opportunities and doors, and life gets better, and food tastes better, and music's better. Like everything's just a little bit better when you have the time to process, like, okay, this is who I am now, and I'm embracing it to like its fullest potential. And that's really cool that you're doing that, man. So I just want to say that, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated this like open, honest conversation. It's been just a fantastic one, and I hope it helps a lot of people out there. So Dana, I'm sorry, jeez, Dana, what am I talking about? Luke, before we jump off,
Yeah.
If someone was trying to get sober tomorrow, what kind of advice could you leave with?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I could say, if someone's trying to get sober tomorrow, the only thing that they can do is make that choice. Only you can make that choice. No one could tell me that, as much as they could try to tell me. When you're ready, you're gonna know. But for those looking to get sober tomorrow, what I will say is, go for it. Don't be scared. You will find that the life of sobriety is a lot of fun. Your health and wellness will change. Your finances will change. How you show up in relationships will change. And you'll find real, true, connected relationships. Speaking for myself, the people that I thought I was connected to, they're gone. They're gone. Those are superficial relationships. And anyone that really is rooting for you and your health and wellness is certainly not going to support your demise in drinking.
Exactly. You'll weed out the real ones quite
100%.
quickly when you decide to better yourself. Because who in their right mind would belittle someone who's trying to get better? Be a better person.
I wish I had some prophetic, advice. I all I can say is that, and speaking for myself, life
The
just
best advice.
gets much more manageable, and life is, still going to pose difficulties, but you can stay optimistic, or you can be pessimistic, and that's the individual choice.
Yeah.
I'm going to choose optimism. I'm going to choose growth.
Mhm.
And that for me is life's work. And I intend to do that until I draw my last breath. And I want to spread that news. I think recovering out loud is something that I was missing out on. And it's a blessing to be a part of this community.
It sure
It's
is.
a big deal.
It really is. And thank you for being a big part of it. So that's amazing. Yeah. So Luke, where can people find you if they want to connect?
You can find me on Instagram at Dad on the Mox, and I always welcome people. Send me a direct message. I'm always willing to just connect. Sometimes I've had people reach out to me locally, asking me for advice on sobriety, ask me for advice on parenting, relationships, and I'm always eager to answer and to get involved and connect with new like-minded people. So
That's great.
That's the best place to find me.
There we go. Well, there we go. Hit up Luke, guys. Hit up Luke if you're struggling or if you need some good advice, because he's got a lot of the answers, and he's going to help you from a compassionate and sympathetic nature, because he's been through it. So thank you again, Luke, for coming on. I just wanted to quickly remind everyone out there, I got a some information given to me that 76% of the people following my content, and I'm trying not to make this in a self-serving way. It's just a really interesting thing that I kind of want to hope that it kind of gets better is that 76% of the people that are regularly following my content on YouTube and they haven't hit subscribe yet, and I don't know why that is. If my show has helped you in any way, if one of my guests has helped you in a tough spot in any way, if any of this is meaningful to you, please hit that subscribe button. It's the easiest and the freest way to absolutely support the show and make it a little easier for all of us here that work at the Willpower Podcast to keep the lights on, things like that. So every donation would be awesome, and every subscription would just be an awesome way to pay it forward. So thank you guys so much for watching another episode of the Willpower Podcast. I can't thank you enough. We're coming up almost on 1 year anniversary of the Willpower Podcast, which is just incredible. I didn't see it going. I didn't see it getting bigger. I honestly, it was a hobby that now is morphing into maybe something bigger than that. And I owe it all to you guys out there for listening, watching, and sharing, and all that other stuff. So thank you guys so much for everything that you do, and be on the lookout for many, many more episodes coming soon. Thank you, Luke.
All right, click the subscribe button. Thanks, Will.
Smash subscribe. Okay, yeah, just hit subscribe. It's okay. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks so much.